Her name was Emily Carter. She was 38 years old. For most of her life, Emily had been the invisible daughter in a family that worshipped her younger sister, Lucy. Born into a modest household on the outskirts of Birmingham, Emily's early years were marked by quiet neglect and unspoken resentment. Her parents had always lavished attention on Lucy, who had arrived unexpectedly after years of disappointment, and whose fragile health made her the center of the family's universe. Emily's achievements were overlooked, her successes dismissed as insignificant next to the constant demands of caring for Lucy. But beneath her calm exterior, a simmering storm of humiliation and injustice brewed. A storm that would one day fuel a relentless quest for justice and retribution. The turning point came on a chilly November evening at the annual family Thanksgiving gathering held at their childhood home. Emily had recently come into a substantial inheritance, £12 million from a distant relative's estate, a fact she had kept secret, wary of how it might disrupt the fragile family balance. But Lucy, ever watchful, discovered the truth. That night, surrounded by a roomful of relatives, Emily was blindsided as her family confronted her, demanding she share her fortune, insisting that Lucy deserved it more. It was a moment of public humiliation, a cruel betrayal that stripped Emily of her dignity and revealed the true depths of her family's hypocrisy. In the days leading up to that fateful evening, tensions had quietly escalated. Emily had noticed subtle shifts in her family's behavior, sideways glances, whispered conversations, and Lucy's increasingly brazen demands for favors and financial support. Their parents, once indifferent, now seemed eager to justify their daughter's entitlement, painting Emily as cold and selfish for wanting to keep what was rightfully hers. The air was thick with resentment and condescension, and Emily felt the old wounds of childhood reopening, the countless times she had been sidelined, the achievements ignored, the love withheld. This wasn't just about money, it was about years of disrespect finally coming to a head. The night of the confrontation unfolded like a slow-burning nightmare. As Emily carefully arranged the catering, an extravagant spread she had paid for herself, hoping to bring some peace to the gathering, Lucy pounced. She snatched Emily's laptop, which displayed her burgeoning business accounts, and flaunted the evidence of Emily's wealth before the assembled guests. The room fell into stunned silence as the true extent of Emily's success became undeniable. Faces contorted with shock, disbelief, and envy. Her mother's forced smile twisted into something colder. Her father's amusement faded into bitter accusation. Lucy's triumphant smirk masked a deeper betrayal, the theft of Emily's privacy and the weaponization of her own success against her. Emily was mocked, dismissed, and accused of hoarding her fortune, all while the family's true greed and hypocrisy lay bare. As the chaos spiraled, Emily's resolve crystallized. The years of invisibility and quiet suffering had forged her into a woman who would no longer be sidelined or silenced. The anger that surged through her veins was not just rage, it was the fuel for a deliberate, calculated retaliation. No longer would she be the family's secret, the forgotten daughter. She would expose their lies, their entitlement, and their cruelty. Not with loud accusations, but with quiet, unyielding justice. The moment Lucy's deceit was laid bare was the seed of Emily's revenge, a turning point where humiliation transformed into power. In the aftermath of the explosive dinner, Emily sat alone in her childhood bedroom, the one untouched since she left for university. The silence was deafening, pierced only by the ticking of the old clock her mother had given her years ago. Her mind raced through every slight, every ignored achievement, every whispered insult. The pain was raw, but beneath it lay an unshakable determination. She thought of all the times she had been cast aside, all the moments Lucy's shadow had darkened her life. Now she was no longer a victim, but a force to be reckoned with. Revenge, she realized, would not be swift nor loud. It would be precise, methodical, and devastating. Then came the unexpected twist that changed everything. While sifting through documents related to her inheritance, Emily uncovered a trove of financial irregularities linked to her parents' expenditures, suspicious loans, secret accounts, and debts disguised as family emergencies. Evidence that her parents had not only demanded her money, but had misappropriated funds, living beyond their means while painting a picture of hardship. This discovery handed Emily an unassailable advantage, proof of their duplicity and greed. It was a weapon she could wield quietly, dismantling their facade of victimhood and exposing their hypocrisy in the most devastating way. With this newfound leverage, Emily began to orchestrate her comeback. She hired a discreet legal team to investigate the financial mismanagement and consulted trusted allies in the business world to solidify her growing empire. She quietly severed ties with those who had betrayed her and nurtured relationships with those who recognized her true worth. Her company flourished, and so did her reputation, not just as a successful entrepreneur, but as a woman who had overcome betrayal and refused to be broken. The power dynamic shifted irreversibly. Emily was no longer the invisible daughter, but the architect of her family's reckoning. As her success soared, so did the tension within the family. At every Sunday dinner, which Emily continued to attend, playing the part of the modest sister, Lucy and their parents grew increasingly desperate, resorting to thinly veiled insults and passive-aggressive jabs. Emily responded with a cold composure, letting their words hang empty in the air while she quietly amassed evidence and influence. Her revenge was no longer about money. It was about reclaiming respect and exposing the rot beneath the family's polished surface. The stakes escalated, and the inevitable confrontation loomed on the horizon, a dramatic crescendo building with every calculated move she made. Then came the hyperbolic climax of the drama. Emily orchestrated a public unveiling of her family's financial misdeeds during a high-profile charity gala, where the same relatives who had mocked her sat among the elite. With the precision of a seasoned debater, she exposed their lies, their greed, and their hypocrisy, shattering their carefully constructed reputations. The room erupted in disbelief and shame, but Emily stood unshaken, vindicated, powerful, and finally free. The humiliation she once endured had been turned on its head. She was no longer a victim, but the victor. As the dust settled, Emily prepared for the final act. The family, now fractured and desperate, scrambled to salvage what little dignity remained. But Emily held the ultimate card, the promise of justice not just for herself, but for the truth long buried beneath years of neglect and lies. Standing at the edge of her triumph, she paused, the tension palpable, the outcome uncertain. Would they accept their reckoning or descend further into denial? The answer hung in the air, a silent question that demanded reckoning, and Emily knew this was just the beginning of her true victory. That November evening at the Carter family home was meant to be a quiet gathering, a chance to celebrate tradition and togetherness. Instead, it became the night Emily's carefully guarded secret was torn from her hands, igniting a storm of betrayal and humiliation that would change everything. She had spent weeks preparing the evening, determined to make the holiday special despite the familiar undercurrent of tension that always accompanied family events. Knowing her mother's worsening back pain, Emily had taken the initiative to arrange for a high-end caterer from Birmingham's finest establishments to handle the meal. This was her way of easing the burden, a gesture of goodwill she hoped might soften the atmosphere. But as the guests arrived, Emily already sensed the subtle shifts in the room, the sharp glances Lucy exchanged with their parents, the barely concealed whispers that stopped when she entered. The family had always viewed Emily's success with a mixture of envy and suspicion. To them, she was the dutiful daughter who quietly disappeared into the background, while Lucy was the golden child whose every achievement was celebrated. Emily had long learned to accept her role, to keep her ambitions and triumphs to herself. Tonight, however, that fragile balance was about to shatter. During the meal, as laughter echoed around the polished dining table and the scent of expertly prepared dishes filled the air, Lucy leaned over and snatched Emily's laptop from the sideboard. The device, left unattended as Emily checked emails and monitored an important auction for her jewelry authentication business, displayed the stark truth of her financial success. In bold figures, the screen revealed a £12 million account balance, pending contracts worth nearly £500,000, and recent transactions amounting to over £1 million. The room froze. Conversations stuttered to a halt. Eyes darted between Emily and the glowing screen, disbelief morphing into something darker. Lucy's triumphant smirk betrayed her intention to expose Emily's secret wealth and force her family to confront the reality they had long ignored. But the damage went deeper than she realized. What was meant as a public shaming became an unmasking of years of lies and hypocrisy. Emily's mother's forced smile faltered, her eyes flickering with a tangled mix of shock and resentment. Her father's amusement vanished, replaced by a bitter scowl. The very family who had dismissed Emily's ambitions now recoiled from the truth they had refused to acknowledge. The humiliation was immediate and searing. Whispers turned to accusations, subtle jabs turned into open contempt. "You have millions and you let us struggle?" her mother demanded, voice trembling between anger and disbelief. "We raised you. You owe us," her father added, his tone sharp and unforgiving. Lucy, tears streaming down her cheeks, accused Emily of betrayal, claiming she deserved a share of the fortune for all the sacrifices made. The room, once filled with warmth and tradition, now felt cold and hostile. A battleground where years of resentment erupted in one cruel public spectacle. Emily sat in stunned silence at first, the weight of their words crashing down on her like a tidal wave. She had expected disappointment, perhaps jealousy, but not this raw, venomous betrayal. Her achievements, her sacrifices, every sleepless night and lonely victory were dismissed as selfishness. The very people who should have celebrated her success were intent on tearing her down. Yet, beneath the shock, a fierce clarity began to emerge. The humiliation was not an end, but a beginning. It was the crack in the foundation, the spark that would ignite her quiet, unyielding revenge. In the days leading up to that Thanksgiving night, Emily had felt the growing weight of unspoken tensions pressing down on her. The family gatherings, once a place of mild discomfort, had become arenas of quiet hostility. Lucy's subtle digs had increased from playful teasing to pointed remarks about Emily's little antique shop and her supposed lack of a real job. Their parents had shifted too, no longer content to ignore Emily's accomplishments, but instead dismissing them with condescending smiles and hollow compliments. It was as if they were rehearsing lines, preparing to undermine her at the first opportunity. Emily's careful attempts to share her life with them had always been met with polite disinterest. When she brought up her work authenticating rare jewelry, they nodded vaguely, eyes glazing over as if she were speaking a foreign language. Invitations to family events were often overshadowed by discussions about Lucy's latest achievements, her new marketing role, her social life, and of course, her endless cheerleading competitions. Emily was the quiet shadow in the background, the daughter who didn't quite fit the family narrative. What stung the most was the way her family rewrote history to suit their story. They painted Lucy as the fragile, special child who required constant care and attention, and Emily as the independent one who didn't need their love or support. But Emily remembered the countless times she had been sent away at the slightest sign of illness, shipped off to relatives so as not to endanger Lucy. She remembered the empty chairs at her school concerts, the unacknowledged awards, the silent dinners where her achievements were ignored. All the while, Lucy had learned to manipulate this dynamic to her advantage, mastering the art of playing the victim while reaping the rewards. Her parents' financial priorities reflected this imbalance too. While Emily had scrimped and saved to pay for her university fees without a word of help, Lucy's private schooling and expensive extracurriculars were funded without hesitation. Loans were taken out for Lucy's medical bills, while Emily's modest living was met with subtle pity and occasional reminders that she should consider a more practical career. The disparity was glaring, yet Emily had kept her head down, determined to carve her own path despite the emotional neglect. This simmering resentment reached its breaking point in the weeks before Thanksgiving, when Lucy began making overt demands. She hinted at needing money for a new car, for trips with friends, and for an MBA program at an exclusive university. Their mother, ever eager to cast herself as the family martyr, pleaded with Emily to help out where she could, couching it in tearful appeals about keeping the family together. But Emily saw through the facade. It wasn't about family. It was about entitlement and control. Despite all of this, Emily had tried to maintain peace, to keep her success a quiet secret rather than a weapon. She had hoped that someday, perhaps, her family would see her for who she truly was. But now, with Lucy's public exposure of her wealth at the dinner table, that hope was shattered. The betrayal was not just in the revelation itself, but in the way her family had turned on her, using her own success as a weapon to shame and manipulate. The stage was set for a reckoning, and Emily knew there was no turning back. The injustice she had endured for so long demanded a response, not just for her own dignity, but to expose the hypocrisy that had poisoned her family for years. The moment Lucy flipped Emily's laptop around was like a dagger plunged straight into her chest. The glow of the screen illuminated the stunned faces of the family, a tableau of shock, envy, and disbelief. Emily's £12 million balance, the pending contracts worth hundreds of thousands, the recent £1 million transactions, all laid bare for the first time. It was more than just numbers on a screen. It was the undeniable proof of Emily's success, the very success they had dismissed and belittled for years. The room fell into a suffocating silence. The clinking of cutlery stopped. Even the carefully catered meal seemed to lose its appeal. Eyes darted from the screen to Emily and back again, searching for answers, for cracks in her composure. But Emily sat still, her fingers tightening around the edge of her chair. The humiliation of being exposed like this, in front of relatives she had spent years trying to impress or simply tolerate, was overwhelming. Lucy's smirk twisted into something colder as she basked in the moment, convinced she had finally won. "So, this is what you've been hiding," she said loudly, voice dripping with triumph. "Millions while the rest of us struggle. How could you keep this from us?" The accusation wasn't just about money. It was a judgment on Emily's worth as a sister, a daughter, a member of the family. Emily's mother forced a laugh, nervously smoothing her skirt. Emily, what are you thinking? You have millions, and yet you let us struggle to make ends meet. It's irresponsible." Her words, coated in false concern, cut deeper than any insult. Her father, eyes narrowed, shook his head. "You should be ashamed. We raised you. You owe us." The room echoed with their voices, a chorus of blame and entitlement. Tears welled in Lucy's eyes, but they were not tears of sorrow. They were calculated, designed to manipulate. "How could you betray us like this? We're family, Sarah. You should be sharing." Her sobs were met with murmurs of agreement from aunts and uncles who had long judged Emily's quiet independence as coldness. Emily's heart pounded, anger flaring beneath the surface. Years of being sidelined, dismissed, and undervalued exploded into a fierce blaze of emotion. But she kept her voice steady, controlled. "I have been sharing," she said quietly, "sending you money every month without complaint. But what I won't do is be guilt-tripped or disrespected by the people who ignored me for years." Her eyes locked with her mother's, unflinching. "I built this life on my own. I earned every penny." The room erupted into chaos. Voices overlapped, accusations, denials, cries of betrayal. The catering staff hovered awkwardly, unsure whether to intervene or disappear. Emily stood, gathering her belongings calmly. The chair scraped back sharply as she rose, the sound echoing through the stunned silence. She caught the horrified glance of her father and the frustrated glare of Lucy, but she no longer cared. With a deliberate step, she walked out of the room, leaving behind the shattered illusions of family and the smoldering embers of her humiliation. That night marked the beginning of a new chapter, one where Emily would no longer be invisible, but a force of quiet, unrelenting justice. The chaos that followed Emily's departure from the dining room was a storm of voices and emotions colliding in a space that moments before had been filled with forced cheer. Her mother's sobs were loud and theatrical, a desperate attempt to reclaim sympathy. "How could you walk out on your family like that?" she wailed, voice cracking with false anguish. Her father's anger boiled over into bitter declarations about duty, sacrifice, and betrayal, his face flushed with a mixture of frustration and disbelief. Lucy's tears, once so convincing, now seemed brittle and rehearsed, a mask for her growing panic. But Emily was miles away, both physically and emotionally. The car ride home was a blur of cold air and quiet fury. She gripped the steering wheel with white-knuckled determination, replaying every cruel word, every dismissive glance, every moment of being overlooked. The weight of years spent invisible, ignored, and belittled pressed down on her chest, but beneath it, a fierce fire was igniting. This was not defeat. It was the breaking point, the moment when humiliation transforms into resolve. Back in the solitude of her flat, surrounded by the quiet hum of the city outside, Emily allowed herself a moment to breathe, to feel the raw sting of betrayal and the bitter taste of injustice. The carefully constructed facade of the perfect family had crumbled, revealing a toxic core of greed and entitlement. She thought of Lucy, the golden child, whose every demand was met with indulgence, while she had labored in silence, building a life from nothing. Her mind raced through memories, the empty seats at her school concerts, the unacknowledged awards, the countless times she had been sent away at the slightest sign of illness, cast aside as a threat to Lucy's fragile health. The stories her parents told themselves to justify their neglect now rang hollow. She was done playing the part of the invisible daughter, yet beneath the pain was a cold clarity. Revenge would not be a reckless outburst, it would be a measured, deliberate campaign. Emily knew the power of quiet persistence, of strategic moves made behind the scenes. She had spent years honing her skills, attention to detail, negotiation, research, all tools she would now wield to expose the hypocrisy that had ruled her family's life. As she sat at her desk, the flickering light of her laptop casting shadows on the walls, Emily began to plan. Her company was thriving, her reputation growing. She had contacts, resources, and the knowledge to fight back. The humiliation of tonight would be the catalyst, the seed from which her quiet retaliation would grow. No longer a victim, she was becoming the architect of her own justice, a justice that would be as precise as it was inevitable. In the stillness of that night, Emily's thoughts swirled like a tempest, each memory and emotion colliding with relentless force. The shock of betrayal still burned deep, but it was anger that began to take root, sharp and unyielding. She recalled the countless times she had been dismissed, her achievements brushed aside as insignificant while Lucy basked in the spotlight, the subtle, poisonous way her family had rewritten history to excuse their neglect, how Lucy was fragile and special, while Emily was cast as cold and distant. It was a narrative she had been forced to accept, but now it ignited a fierce determination to reclaim her story. Her mind drifted back to the childhood moments that had shaped her, the nights spent alone while her parents fussed over Lucy's every need, the endless hospital visits, the sterile house filled with antiseptic and silence, how she had been sent away at the first sign of a cold, treated like a threat rather than a daughter. The loneliness had carved a hollow in her heart, but it had also forged resilience. She had learned to be self-sufficient, to rely on no one but herself. That independence, once a survival mechanism, was now her greatest strength. The sting of being overlooked at school, of empty seats at her concerts while Lucy's barely competent performances were celebrated, flared anew. But Emily no longer felt the need to defend herself to those who had never cared. Instead, she embraced the clarity that had emerged from years of quiet suffering. She was worthy, capable, and no longer invisible. The injustice she had endured was no longer a burden, but a weapon. As the night deepened, Emily's anger sharpened into resolve. She thought of her business, The empire she had built from a passion for vintage jewelry authentication, the network of collectors and experts she had cultivated, the reputation she had earned through relentless dedication. This was her domain, her kingdom, and it was hers alone. The humiliation of that evening would not define her. Instead, it would be the catalyst for a calculated, unrelenting comeback. She pictured the family dinners to come, the smug remarks, the thinly veiled insults. But this time, she would be ready. Armed with evidence, strategy, and the quiet confidence born of success, Emily would dismantle their false narratives piece by piece. Her revenge would not be loud or reckless. It would be precise, measured, and devastating. In the silence of her apartment, she promised herself that this time she would be the one holding the power. The invisible daughter was gone. In her place stood a woman determined to expose the truth and claim the justice she deserved. Weeks after that shattering Thanksgiving, Emily stumbled upon something that shifted the entire balance of power. While reviewing financial documents related to the estate she had inherited, a series of irregularities caught her eye. At first, they seemed like minor discrepancies, odd transfers here, unexplained loans there. But as she dug deeper, a disturbing pattern emerged. Her parents had been living far beyond their means, taking secret loans and diverting money through shadowy accounts, all while painting a picture of hardship to guilt her into sharing her fortune. It was a betrayal of trust on a level she hadn't anticipated. This discovery was more than just financial mismanagement. It was the key to unraveling years of deceit. Emily realized that the family's claims of struggle, the tearful pleas for help, and the excuses for their behavior were all part of a carefully crafted illusion. They had used her success as a weapon, demanding support while hiding their own reckless spending and poor decisions. The very people who had dismissed her achievements were now exposed as the true architects of their troubles. Armed with this knowledge, Emily felt a surge of empowerment. The weight of years spent being invisible and undervalued lifted slightly, replaced by a growing confidence that justice was within reach. She began quietly gathering evidence, documenting every suspicious transaction and irregularity. It was a painstaking process, requiring patience and meticulous attention to detail, qualities she had honed during her years authenticating rare jewelry. Every document, every bank statement became a piece of the puzzle she was determined to solve. But this was not just about exposing financial wrongdoing. It was about reclaiming her narrative and dismantling the hypocrisy that had poisoned her family. Emily understood that revealing these secrets would shake the foundations of their relationships and force a reckoning none of them were prepared for. Yet the prospect no longer frightened her. Instead, it ignited a fierce determination to use this leverage wisely, to turn the tables in a way that would leave no doubt of where true responsibility lay. This twist, this unexpected opportunity, was the moment Emily had been waiting for. It transformed her from the quiet victim into a woman with the means and moral authority to fight back. With the evidence in hand and her resolve solidified, she began to plan her next moves carefully. The power dynamic had shifted. Emily was no longer on the defensive. Now she held the cards. With the damning evidence securely in her possession, Emily moved with deliberate precision. She enlisted the help of a trusted solicitor, one known for discretion and tenacity, and together they began to untangle the web of financial deceit that had long been hidden beneath her family's polished facade. What had once seemed insurmountable was now a calculated campaign to expose the truth and reclaim what was rightfully hers. Emily's approach was quiet but unyielding. She sent carefully worded letters demanding transparency and accountability, presenting her family with undeniable proof of their mismanagement and hidden debts. The tone was firm yet measured, a far cry from the emotional outbursts of the past. She knew that breaking down years of denial required patience and strategy, not anger alone. Slowly, the cracks began to show. Her parents, confronted with irrefutable evidence, could no longer maintain their facade of victimhood. The financial strain they had disguised in tearful appeals was laid bare, revealing a pattern of reckless spending and manipulation. Emily watched, with a mixture of satisfaction and sorrow, as the family she had once tried so hard to please struggled to respond. Their protests became more desperate, their excuses thinner, as the truth settled like a weight in the room. Meanwhile, Emily's own life flourished. Her business, already thriving, gained new momentum as word spread of her integrity and expertise. Private collectors and high-profile clients sought her out, drawn by her reputation for meticulous authentication and discretion. She expanded her team, hired specialists, and opened new offices, each step a testament to her resilience and determination. Yet through it all, Emily maintained a degree of separation from the chaos unfolding with her family. She attended Sunday dinners no longer as a hopeful daughter, but as a poised woman quietly observing the unraveling drama. Her calm demeanor and subtle confidence unsettled those who had once dismissed her. She even began to play small, deliberate games, wearing exquisite vintage jewelry to family gatherings, pieces worth more than her sister's car, watching with quiet amusement as no one noticed. The power she had gained was intoxicating but tempered by a deep sense of justice. Emily was not interested in petty revenge or public humiliation. Her goal was to restore balance and expose the hypocrisy that had overshadowed her life. Each strategic move was a step toward reclaiming her dignity and asserting her worth on her own terms. The family's illusions were crumbling, and Emily stood at the center of the storm, ready to deliver the quiet, devastating justice she had long deserved. The tension within the Carter family reached a fever pitch as Emily's quiet campaign began to bear fruit. Every Sunday dinner became a battleground of simmering resentment and thinly veiled hostility. Lucy's once confident jabs turned desperate, her forced smiles masking a growing panic. Their parents, once so certain of their control, now shuffled awkwardly, caught between denial and fear. The carefully maintained illusion of familial harmony was unraveling, thread by thread. Emily, however, remained composed, a poised observer amid the chaos she had orchestrated. Each calculated glance, each subtle smile bore the weight of years spent in silence. She had become a master of restraint, wielding her power not with loud accusations, but with the quiet assurance of someone who knew the truth and held all the cards. Her success, her growing empire, and her mounting evidence left the family no room to maneuver. The hyperbole of the situation was almost surreal. The same relatives who once dismissed her as the invisible sister now found themselves scrambling to justify their actions, their greed, and their hypocrisy. Emily's name was whispered with a mixture of awe and fear in social circles, her reputation as a shrewd businesswoman and relentless truth-seeker spreading far beyond the family's reach. Invitations to exclusive events, offers of partnerships, and media interest followed, each one a reminder of the gulf between her and those who had tried to diminish her. At the heart of it all was the ultimate irony. The Carter family's desperate attempts to claim a share of Emily's wealth only highlighted their own moral bankruptcy. Their greed, entitlement, and betrayal were laid bare for all to see. But Emily's revenge was not rooted in cruelty. It was a profound act of justice, a reclaiming of agency and dignity. The stakes had never been higher, and the inevitable climax loomed like a gathering storm. As the pressure mounted, Emily prepared for the final act, a moment where the full weight of her quiet retaliation would be revealed. The walls she had built around her success, resilience, and integrity were about to collide with the fragile facade of her family's lies. The drama was set to reach a crescendo, a reckoning that would leave no doubt about where true loyalty and honor lay. The question hung heavy in the air. Would her family finally acknowledge the truth, or would they crumble beneath the weight of their own hypocrisy? Emily stood ready, the architect of their reckoning, poised to deliver the justice she had long earned. The evening of reckoning arrived with a quiet intensity that belied the storm beneath. Emily had invited the family to a charity gala held at one of Birmingham's grandest halls, a subtle stage where the masks of civility would be tested. The same relatives who had so callously dismissed her achievements now found themselves face to face with the undeniable truth she had quietly amassed. The air was thick with anticipation, the tension palpable as Emily prepared to unveil the evidence that would shatter the illusions once and for all. As the guests mingled beneath crystal chandeliers, Emily stepped forward with the calm authority of a woman who had mastered her destiny. With a measured voice, she laid bare the intricate web of financial deceit, presenting documents, bank statements, and correspondence that exposed her parents' reckless loans and secret accounts. The room fell silent, the weight of her revelations settling heavily. Faces paled, eyes darted, and whispers turned to gasps as the family's carefully constructed narratives unraveled before a crowd of influential onlookers. Lucy's facade cracked visibly, her triumphant smirk replaced by a flicker of panic. Her parents' polite smiles faded into stunned silence, the shame of their duplicity etched across their features. Emily's words were not just an indictment of their actions, but a declaration of her own resilience and worth. She was no longer the invisible sister, the overlooked daughter. She was a force of justice, a woman who had reclaimed her story and exposed the hypocrisy that had long held her captive. As the evening wore on, the consequences of Emily's revelations began to ripple outward. Family members retreated into whispered conversations, their alliances shifting and fracturing, social circles buzzed with the scandal, and the media caught wind of the story, drawn to the drama of betrayal within a once-respected family. Yet amidst the chaos, Emily remained steady, her gaze fixed on the horizon of a new beginning. Standing on the cusp of her triumph, Emily paused, the weight of years of pain and perseverance settling around her like a cloak. The path to justice had been long and arduous, but now, as the echoes of her family's downfall reverberated, she felt a profound sense of liberation. The question lingered in the charged air. How would her family choose to respond? Would they seek reconciliation, or would their pride and denial push them further into ruin? For Emily, the answer was clear. She had reclaimed her power, her dignity, and her future. The invisible daughter was gone. In her place stood a woman who had turned humiliation into strength, betrayal into opportunity, and silence into justice. The final chapter was yet to be written, but one thing was certain: the reckoning had come, and Emily was its unyielding architect.